Hello, everybody. Today we will be covering cardiac anatomy, and we will start with the chambers of the heart. So, blood comes back to the heart through the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. This comes from the systemic circulation. Don't worry about that for now. We will get into that later. But blood basically comes back from the body and pools in the right atrium. The right atrium then pumps blood through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle then pumps blood through the pulmonic valve into the pulmonary artery. It's called the pulmonic valve or pulmonary valve because it goes into the pulmonary artery. Now, the pulmonary artery branches into the left and right pulmonary branches to go into the lungs. The lungs, we don't have to worry about that right now, but basically when blood is in the lungs, it's going to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And the reoxygenated blood is going to return to the lungs. That is called the pulmonic circulation into the left atrium, the left side of the heart. This left atrium collects blood, and then it pumps blood through the mitral valve, otherwise known as the bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle. This left ventricle is going to be much thicker than the right ventricle because it pumps blood through the aortic valve into the aorta. The aorta is this large vessel here that basically sends blood into the rest of the body. Now we're going to talk about the various circulations. So this is just another view of the heart. Imagine these are just very primitive representations of the chambers of the heart. But as we mentioned here, as the blood gets pumped from the oxygenated blood gets pumped from the left ventricle through the aorta, it goes into these arteries here as it branches into these arterioles as it further branches, and eventually it branches into its smallest form, the capillaries. And these capillaries are where most of the oxygen is exchanged from the oxygenated blood into the various cells. Maybe you're, providing oxygen to a muscle. But then as it gets deoxygenated, the blood will return back to the right atrium here through venules, and these are going to combine to form veins, and these combine to form the SVC, IVC that we mentioned earlier to go into the right atrium. This here is called the systemic circulation because it forms in the body. Now the pulmonary circulation, as we mentioned earlier, it goes into the pulmonary artery and eventually goes into the right and left pulmonary arteries. Remember, these are arteries even though they have deoxygenated blood because they are going away from the heart. And these are going to further branch. This all happens within the lungs into the arteries, eventually the arterioles, and the pulmonary capillary bed. The pulmonary capillary bed is where all the oxygen exchange and the carbon dioxide exchange occurs before it pools back as oxygenated blood into the venules and eventually into the 4 pulmonary veins that lead back to the left atrium. Now, I mentioned earlier that the muscle wall of the left ventricle, for example, is going to be thicker than the right ventricle. But the actual muscle walls themselves, they're going to have the same layers in both. The only thing that will vary is the thickness. The innermost layer is endocardium. You have the blood in the inner chamber, and the innermost part of the wall is called the endocardium, followed by the myocardium. This is going to be where all the actual muscle of the wall is. And this is going to be surrounded by the epicardium, as well as the pericardial fluid. And you have this outer layer here called the fibrous pericardium that basically just protects the heart. Now, the heart itself is made of cells just like the rest of the body, and that means that they're going to need nutrients, they're going to need oxygen, they're going to need to get rid of their metabolic waste. And how does it do that? Well, as blood is pumped out of the aorta here, this valve will eventually close, and the blood will rush back and hit this closed valve. And as it hits the closed valve, some blood will go into the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. And this will provide blood to the musculature of the heart, and thus that's where the blood exchange will occur in the heart itself. What's not listed here is the coronary veins, which return blood to the right atrium, which would be located around here. The reason it's not located here is because the anatomy typically varies among different people.